So we were going to talk about a bunch of things, but
Yeah.
and and I think I'm not sure whether it's um, uh, your subscribers or my subscribers because it's on yours, but it doesn't really matter.
They'll
Um,
come. They'll be yours as well because I co-hosted you, so they'll be popping.
okay,
It'll be popping up in all of your subscribers. The only thing I didn't do, everybody listening, was put in the title of what we're talking about
okay,
because we were trying to. So we are talking about generational wealth in the UK and in the USA, which I mean, it's a fascinating subject. And one of the things you do so well, David, and really the reason I found you and was really drawn to your Substack is because you're so transparent and open about all the stuff around being wealthy. And I don't know about you, maybe we could start there, like around the shame around it.
well, I think,
And
yeah, I mean, I think there's some guilt, right?
yeah,
Because you open up the newspaper, or you you wonder, why am I so quote lucky,
yeah,
and
lucky.
um, and there are people who um inherit wealth, and then they can't handle it, and
Yeah,
they lose
I
it,
know.
or
Right,
lose it through all sorts of different ways.
right.
Um, I was lucky
Yeah,
in that my role models, or my familial role models, were people who were successful in business, and I wanted to emulate them. But
yeah.
I could easily have gone a different path.
Yeah, and I mean, I have examples of all different iterations around it. I was thinking today in preparation for this conversation, I did absolutely nothing to earn the position I'm in, the privilege I have. I was 100% born into it. And I know people in my position, yeah, who haven't been able to handle it in terms of just the amount of scope it gives you, and not being given enough kind of guidance and blueprint, being given it too young, being given it too old, in the sense that they'd already found their groove, sorting themselves out, and then didn't want to be then given this thing which forced them into a certain channel. Um, and I know as well, like, I mean, I definitely had a lot of guilt as a young person. It's why I ran the commune. It's why I did all the things I did. I absolutely walked away from the background that I was born into. But one of the reasons I know I work so hard as a writer is because any achievement in that field, I have earned it. It's
Right. It's
100% mine.
we all
Yeah.
right. We all have that blank screen, or the blank page.
Yeah.
But you've written about different tiers of wealth. You wrote A Perfect Explanation, which really
Mm.
examined your own, I guess, family history, and I guess in partially an imagined way, but with a lot of clues, which I
Yeah.
loved. A Perfect
Thank you.
Explanation is a great book,
Thank
um,
you.
and a great insight into. I thought it was a great insight into some of the ways that generational wealth can be oppressive. Um,
Oh, totally. And I see that again, I'll be careful so I don't, betray anybody's trust, but I certainly see generational wealth as a millstone. And we talk about this a lot within my immediate family. So me and my two children, around always having to understand there is choice in there, because I'm familiar with people in my position for whom they have forgotten, or it was never made clear to them that there is a choice, and so whatever they inherited, and in our case, it's very much bricks and mortar land. You're walking on it, you can see it, and I know the British, anyway, the English are very kind of ownership orientated. An Englishman's home is his castle, and that's not just a phrase, that goes very deep in our blood. And so I know people for whom, on the outside, that it looks like, yeah, that incredible privilege. They've inherited amazing estates and land and the whole number. But it isn't necessarily the life they would have chosen. And it's not necessarily the life that they're best at, but they've forgotten they have choice, because ultimately you can sell it all, or if it's tied up in trusts, you can just pull together a board of directors and not have any part in it. So I've seen it act as millstone and be really detrimental to their lives. So I try and impress that upon my own children around, that there's an amazing privilege to it in the sense that they are going to be free to do what they want with their lives, plus run the thing that they're going to be, that they're going to step into. Um, but just to keep that element of choice in there, because otherwise it becomes a bind. I don't know how open have you been with your own children around it, and at what
They're
age? And
they,
what
well,
age
they're
did you start?
yeah. So they're in their they're all in their 30s now. Two of them are married.
Mm,
Um, so and they have their own resources that we started pretty early, I think, after they graduated from college, because we thought that transparency was better, and we also thought they sort of knew. I mean, you can look up
mm,
on the internet what things cost, and um,
right,
I mean, even when they were in like middle school, they had classmates whose parents hadn't waited. So they would talk about, oh, my father just got a bonus of some huge sum, or we just bought a house of some huge sum. So, it's a little bit like the least common denominator in the private school world in Manhattan, where some people are, if you get just a few boastful parents who aren't, you know, thinking about what they're saying in front of their kids, it in the
right.
daughter. But I've always thought transparency was important, because to just sort of thrust something on them didn't make sense. And as my career took off and we were able to afford nicer things, they were participating in that. So I also felt like it wouldn't make sense to just say, okay, now you're off in college, and we're not going to help you at all. Um, so
But how did you prepare them to be both enormously as conscious as they could be, grateful, and at the same time, not take advantage of it and just be layabout, and also not be completely, like done down by the pressure of it. How did you navigate that, and at what ages did you have specific conversations?
we Debbie, my wife, always insisted that they have an allowance. I've
Mm.
written about this, as opposed to an increasing number of kids were just given credit cards,
Right.
because that's the easy thing to do, right? You don't have to negotiate
Mm.
with the kids, and so thankfully, I'm not sure. I might have done that if my lazy bones would have come into play. So that was good, and they complained at the time
Mm.
about that they couldn't do certain things, and now they all say that was a good thing. Um, I think
Mm.
also, and they've heard this sort of ad nauseum from me. Uh, I keep, I try to give them this formula that if you have a certain amount of wealth, you should only spend, think about what percentage of your wealth you're spending over your income, if that's what you're doing. And it's okay, but just think about that. If you're spending too
Lightly lost.
returns
uh,
are going to be okay. So I tried to get, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you again. Sorry, I lost
Oh,
network and
so
you're back. Yeah.
sorry. So I there's a sort of, it could be 2%, 4%, but 3% rule where, okay, if you want to put an amount of wealth in context, what
Mm.
does that mean?
Mm.
You can, if you think about what could you spend, and with reasonable assumptions about inflation and returns on your financial assets, because in the US, most of the I think a large percentage of wealth is tied up in financial assets
Mm.
generationally. as opposed, I guess one of the differences is there's
We're in land.
in
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I tried to give them context
Mm.
around that, and that seems to have worked. And we I don't know, they were always pretty competitive at school and wanting to get, do well. And um
And how would you feel if one of them was an artist, right? And they knew that they weren't going to make loads of money, but but it would make them incredibly happy to pursue that as a career, and they'd be following, but they'd be absolutely taking advantage of their privilege to be able to spend a life not making any money and living off the wealth of their family. How would you feel about that?
I would feel fine with that. I mean, because
Yeah,
I would have felt like I had given them I had provided them with the flexibility to do that, and I think that would be great.
yeah,
So yeah, no, I mean, my daughter, she has a husband who works and so forth, but she's a stay-at-home mom right now, and she loves being a stay-at-home mom for the time being. Well, she has a 2.5-year-old and a half-year-old, so
yeah.
that, that's a full-time job
Which
plus.
is a full-time job. I mean, I undoubtedly, and this is the conversation I have with Jacoby and Blake, who've just reached 18. So we're beginning to have those conversations, and they're not yet invited to the table, because I'm not ready to let them see numbers, because I think that would be psychologically bad for them. But with the conversations we do have, is that they do have the privilege to have the freedom to live the life they really want to live. And I think ultimately that's the most incredible privilege of having wealth, is that you do get to live the life you actually want to lead. But with that also comes with a really big question, like, okay, so what is the life you want to lead? And I've met and known plenty of very wealthy people in my life who can't answer that question, so aren't. And I've also met lots and lots of people who don't have that financial privilege, who say if only they had the money, they would, as if the money would solve the problem of knowing who you are. And so I've come across that frequently in my life. And I know that with great privilege comes that big question to answer, and I make that really clear to them, that that's the job of it. But there's also sorry, go on.
No, please go ahead.
Well, for us, there's also the job, because if you've got generational wealth where you're inheriting financial assets and financial vehicles, they take a lot less management than bricks and mortar, land, and
Yes,
so on.
right. And so in I guess that's how does that impact if you're from a family that and your family stretches way back,
Way
um,
back
um,
1,000 years we can trace in terms of land. 1,000 years, yeah.
1,000 years,
Right.
and so what is that? How does that work? I guess since it's 1,000 years, I've always been fascinated by primogeniture. Perhaps because I'm the eldest son. I've always
Yeah.
it, you- every other April Fools. We have a tradition of of punking each other, and I remember once I sent an email saying, "Finally, Mom and Dad, they've agreed, primogeniture, they've seen the light," to my siblings. But
I mean, it's a funny, not funny joke, I can tell you from where I'm from, because
oh, I'm sure from where
y-
I can joke about it because it's not.
you can joke about it. Yeah. I mean, it's wildly unfair. The bit that's not unfair, that I really understand, is the choice of one family member of the next generation to basically inherit the mother lode, if we're talking about land, bricks and mortar. Oh, I've lost you, David. Oh,
I'm
there you're
sorry.
back. Good.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about estates, which, in my family, that is exactly what we're talking about. And we just, for the minute, accept the premise that this is how the world is, incredibly unfair as it is. This is how it is, certainly in the UK. Then one family member boy or girl inheriting the mother lode makes sense, because in terms of keeping those estates together,
Right.
you simply can't if you divide them up. And in France, they have the system where every estate, well, no matter what it is divided equally between all siblings. And so, of course, as the years go by, the estates are broken up, which I'm sure you could make an argument for that being a good thing. But if you want to make an argument for somebody who's good at looking after estates, runs them very well, creates a cohesive piece of land where, for instance, there's plenty of landowners now who are returning the land to wildlife. There's a lot of biodiversity going on. They're very good landlords. They're looking after it and so on. If that's what you want, you need one person in charge. Does that person have to be a boy? No. Do they even have to be the oldest? No. They have to be the person that's most suited. So, I mean, I'm not in that position, A, because I've got twins, and B, because I don't have that kind of land mass to be thinking about. But were I in that position, and I had quite a few children, I'd be looking at who was best suited to run it, because it's not everyone's cup of tea. And as I said earlier in the conversation, it is a full-time job, and you might want to be a poet or an airline pilot or whatever else. And no, if you inherit that, that's your life. And again, without naming names, I have examples of people who, in their heart, yeah, they're artists, but this is what's happened, and it's amazing, and they're going to make the best of it. So they have a very creative approach to it. They pour their creativity into it. But the very idea that the eldest son is the right person, well, it's been proved time and time and time again what an absolutely insane proposition that is.
What a way to, promote sibling comedy.
Oh, wow. You can call it comedy if you want.
I meant comedy, but it's also comedy.
Yeah, comedy, yes.
Comedy and
Yeah,
comedy.
it's tricky. And, even beneath that, there's a difference in how boys and girls are treated. You might have 2 or 3 boys in a family and 3 or 4 girls in a family, and the eldest boy will inherit the mother lode, and then the other boys will inherit more, you know what I mean? And the girls, the girls in my family, we were expected to marry well. Well, that didn't go so well. But that was my father, even though, he was born in 1922, he was the child of Victorians, and he had a Victorian outlook, and he absolutely looked at things like that. And also in terms of our preparation, I mean, I had no preparation, absolutely zero. I really had to learn. During my first divorce was when I learned how the business ran. And then I really learned how it ran. And that was
So,
great.
so there are real estate families in that I know in New York who um, where their main asset are buildings that they never want to sell because they bought them such a long time ago and they don't want to pay taxes on the gains and so forth and so on. And they have most of them have very strict rules about if one of their children is going to marry someone, they have to insist on a prenuptial because it can't be divided. They don't want it encased and so forth. Is that something that is consistent? Like what happens? What are
Yeah.
prenuptials like
Well,
in
in my
Britain?
experience, they're not worth the paper they're written on. What really makes the difference are very clever trust vehicles.
Okay, right.
That's what makes the real difference. And the truth of it is, when I got divorced, what I discovered very clearly was that I am not the castle. I am simply the keeper of the castle, and I will be thrown under the bus to keep that castle intact. And that's the very harsh reality of generational wealth, of old families like mine anyway, so I can only speak for mine, is weirdly, the wealth itself and the estates themselves take precedence over the well-being of the human beings who represent and enjoy
So it's
and
the
are the
institution.
benefactors.
There's an institution. I mean, it's
No
sort of
question about it.
it's like the monarchy, but in a different way where
It's the monarchy writ small.
right, right.
It
It's
absolutely is, isn't it? And it's really insane that bricks and mortar and land and estates and the embodiment of that is literally treated as more important than the people who guide it through their lifetime. Because clearly, a house is not more important than a person, and no amount of money is more important than a person. But the system is set up exactly the opposite to that. So it's no wonder that we, the landed gentry or the British aristocracy or anybody in that kind of old family position, feel like we are the keepers, but our sense of self and worth, our sense of worth is tiny compared to our financial worth.
And hmm, and how do you, how do people well how does the landed aristocracy relate to, let's say, the people who have made money who can't trace their lineage back? What's the status, class, wealth aspect of that? Because we really don't have that in the United
No,
States.
you have
And
other stuff,
we have
but
we
you
have a
don't
lot
have
of
that.
others we have a lot of other stuff. And I
Mm.
sometimes wonder if the clarity of being, there's more there from my point of view as an American who watches things like Downton Abbey and reads, Brideshead Revisited and things like that, to and talks to you and reads your book. It seems like there's more status anxiety in the United States because there's not clarity. Whereas,
Mm.
is there more clarity in England? Because okay, this person's family has
We,
been around for a while. This person's family has a title. Does that How does that play? How does that play out on a day-to-day basis? Do people, when you meet someone, how do they know? Do they find out that you have this lineage?
I think people sniff it out, and I mean, the class system is, it's poison, really. It's absolutely riddled with barbs, and I don't support it in that sense, and I wish it didn't exist, but it does exist, and it goes very, very deep in our system. And weirdly, I would say, the most, first of all, yeah, you can sniff it out. I mean, I can. And I know when I wrote that book, one of the things that, so I'm pointing at it across there, but when I wrote my debut, one of the questions that I was constantly surprised by at the beginning was from people saying, oh, wow, it's really interesting to get an eye view into that class because mostly people don't talk about it. Which to me, because I'm inside of it, it didn't occur to me that people couldn't, it didn't even occur to me that it existed because, you can't feel the water you're swimming in,
Right.
and nor that people couldn't or could see in. It was just, I was like, oh, okay, now you want me to describe this thing that I don't see it anymore because I was born into it and it doesn't occur to me. So that was a kind of like, okay, right, I get that. I'll try and do that. And then there was quite a big sort of hoo-ha around, one must not speak about this stuff that I was speaking about. It's not done. So that also took me by surprise because I just thought, but it's literally been in the newspaper. Why can't I speak about it? So that was very odd. But the other thing that strikes me about the British system or the English class system is that the higher status, and we should talk with the difference between status and wealth.
Right.
The higher status is the longest lineage to the highest position in the land, not wealth. You can be piss poor, but be able to trace your family back to King James, King Edward. And that will take, in a sort of conversational way, in an informal sense that we can all sniff, that will take higher precedence than enormous wealth. So obviously, if there's both, fair enough. But in answer to your question about how we think of what we would call new money, and this is, I'm going to use some really terrible phrases that I don't
Right.
agree with, but these are the phrases: old money, new money. And yeah,
Right.
it's an unbelievably snobbish setup, and it doesn't matter how much. I think obviously it has got a lot better now. I mean, there's no doubt about it. My generation, we're certainly not interested, and we certainly wouldn't try and strengthen that incredible snobism around new and old money. But the fact is, I've still been in rooms where people have said or made that little comment or noticed or known and made that little, side eye to new money and not old money. And yeah, so, and there's a bit of it in the sense of like, I mean, the whole bit about being better than, and there's a real terrible superiority around old money versus new money. Just a little kind of back pocket. Well, I'm better, and that it's. Oh, I mean, it's all awful, unhelpful. It stops us relating as human beings. But I'd be lying if it said it doesn't exist. It totally exists. I mean, I've been to, if you go to Glyndebourne or, the races or something, but Glyndebourne's a really good example of the opera. You can tell in an absolute flash, and you can tell where the judgments are happening as well. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if old money in the U.S. would be, to me, would be like um, people from the Gilded Age. I mean, that's sort of as far back
Right.
as we might go. Now, I mean, if you read Edith Wharton's novel, there were people. Those people were, Vanderbilt was new money, but the people who are old money now have sort of disappeared because they didn't have these landed estates. So,
Right.
as far as
So
I know,
okay. So there is, but are there any, can you identify any areas of snobbery around wealth and status in terms of name? Not
oh, in
necessarily.
terms of name,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think there are. I think that, like, if you meet someone with the last name Rockefeller, for example,
You're going
there's
to sit
a
up in your chair a little bit.
yeah, you're going to say, "Oh,
Mhm.
Rockefeller," or um, the Kennedys, right? Where I mean, I became friends with a one of the less famous Kennedys, although then he became infamous. This was William Kennedy Smith, who was on trial before I knew him, and and so got like a little bit of a glimpse into that Kennedy world. And I was very young; I was 23, 24, and I felt like I was getting a glimpse into an American royal family. And then as I got older, I realized they were, A, they were a tragic family, and B, so many of um, the next generation were really messed up, and
Yeah, I mean, and
afflicted.
right. And just to mirror that in the UK, I really understand the fascination with royalty and the aristocracy over here. But the fact is, I know plenty of families high up on the tree in that sense who are, you know, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. The tragedies that have happened within them, those families, and often they can just feel cursed. I'll use that word. It does. It just feels generation after generation after generation, just tragedies in these magnificent houses with incredible, acres of land. It's a funny correlation, but and obviously I can't say it goes across. It's unique to the aristocracy because that's the only world I know in detail. You know, so who's to know in terms of generational tragedy whether it's unique to them or not? But it certainly is. It's certainly an instance that I recognise, and
So
yet the
you,
fascination persists, doesn't it?
yeah, I mean,
Mm.
the Americans are absolutely fascinated like by the British aristocracy and royalty. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
as we're totally fascinated with Henry VIII. We don't have any analog, so we got rid of being ruled by monarchs, 200 and whatever years ago, and I think, well, I think we 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 envy the
One
pomp and circumstance of
and the simplicity of it. Do you think, even though that sort of I don't know. Is there that? And because it's so incredibly unfair. It's so crazy that somebody who was simply born the son of somebody then becomes king. I mean, what the hell has he done to deserve it? And what does he know about it? And will he be good? And I mean, I'm not a monarchist. I'm not. I wouldn't abolish it 100% because I think as figureheads for tourism and there's all kinds of things
right.
to say, okay, but I would give away Buckingham Palace to the state in a heartbeat. I mean, I would do all kinds of things because I do think it's ridiculous
It
and somewhat embarrassing.
I can see that from your point of view, the embarrassing. I think from and like my mother was just she would get up whenever there was a wedding or a ceremony, she wanted to watch it, and I think that was very similar. It was,
Yeah.
um, people want that sort of that. They, I think it reminds us of all the fairy tales, right? We 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 read about the prince and the princess and the um,
But
it's it,
are they comfortable with the wealth? Because I mean, just to go back to take it back to wealth in terms of the royal family, that's one of the things I find so hard to be around and to look at is that level of wealth in the face of this world and what we're all dealing with. I can't get my head around how they can look themselves in the eye. I
and
just
right and not give away so much more because
so much
they
more.
didn't really do anything to earn it. They didn't
They
start
they
off
don't
with
need seven houses.
right,
They
right.
don't need them. And why don't they? I don't know. And that's the bit I think to bring it back to you and I is being able, which on certainly myself anyway, a much smaller scale. I understand the privilege I've been born into. I do need to look myself in the eye around that, right? Like find that sweet spot between enjoying it, like it's really lovely, but also giving away as much as possible. Do you plan on giving as much away before you die? Is that too personal a question?
No, not at all.
Mm.
I we give away a fair amount currently. Um, I'd like to enjoy, and it's one of the things Debbie and I spend a fair amount of time on. We're fairly hands on with we we've we've graduated, I would say, in philanthropy, which is a highfalutin word, but whatever. Um, from the typical give to schools and so give to schools and so forth, and now we're much more attracted to the grassroots, where we
Mm.
can see what the effect is, have a close relationship with the people running the organizations, and make a difference in the organization. So I wouldn't want to deny myself that and just like leave a bunch of money. I don't know what we'll do. We've made a bequest.
Mm.
We probably will make a few other bequests, but I wouldn't be totally displeased if we timed everything well and our philanthropy took away a lot we were able to give away a lot. Um, so it's a balance. I don't like the idea of um, saying, "Oh, I'll leave it to a foundation or I'll leave it to someone else to give away," because I feel like why? Like there are a lot of people in need today. So
Yeah.
why not do it why not do it today? Um, so that's
Right.
become a pretty big part of our
Planning.
activity. Yeah.
And then the question of at what point, where do we, what level do we leave for our kids? Like, do you know what I mean? Do we want to leave them where we began, or do we want to leave them better than we began, or worse than we began to make up? And have you made those decisions as well?
We we've sort of given our kids the same start that I had, roughly.
Right.
And that was a little bit accidental, but and you mentioned prenuptials versus trusts. We set up a trust for our kids, and we didn't think about it at the time because this was whatever 20 years ago, but it was
Mm.
great when our kids got married. We said, "Oh, it's trust. We don't have to deal with, a negotiation." Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that sort of planning it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um, Not if in case my son-in-law and daughter-in-law are listening to this, not that I love them. Um, I treat them just like a son and daughter as well. We've been very lucky. But
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah, I mean, one does think about these things. And what about in terms of the giving away and the philanthropy work that you do? Can you find that place where you're giving away because you're a good person and you believe in these causes, and you're giving away to make yourself feel better for being so wealthy?
Yeah, I think it's like the avoidance of a negative. Like
Okay.
what kind of person would I be, or what kind of example would I be setting for whomever, and from myself, if we didn't
Mm,
um, make that an important part of our both our financial planning and our activity as well. And so I think if we didn't do that, I'd feel my self-esteem would be a lot lower. So
mm,
there's definitely I think it's a um I almost think of it as if you're if you're if you're really questioning yourself about how you're living your life, to me it's like not to do it. You would think of yourself as, not being a particularly responsible person or a good person in the community.
yeah. And
Um,
what about that overwhelm, of so many good causes, so much one could do, having to make those choices? How does that sit with you in your daily or annual decisions, really?
I think there's like two categories. Or maybe even three, but one category is if a friend is being honored or I want to support someone else's work. Those are smaller donations, but still important. There's some historical things that we just feel like we want to we want to keep up, but our biggest thrusts have been where we're actively involved to the extent we're really trying to help. We have our biggest effort is a school in Washington Heights, one of the poor places, and probably I've talked to you about this before. And so I'm trying to use my connect. The food pantry would be much more efficient if they found a refrigerator to rent, like a big refrigerator. So I'm using
Mm,
my contacts or network with other philanthropy organizations to try to find what the best solution is. So those sorts of hands-on, it's almost like like a project. It's a business. It's like how do you increase the impact? And those
mm,
are the places where we feel like we can have the most impact as
mm.
opposed to a more general pool. And some of that could be selfish, right? Because you want to feel like you're having an impact, and it's not just sort of disappearing into a huge, um, you know, into
Yeah, because I think
a
it's always
multi-billion-dollar
interesting.
endowment. Yeah,
Right. It's always interesting whether a philanthropist chooses to have their name put on the building, school, whatever the thing is, or not, as well,
we
isn't it? And it's fine. It's like, but there's a choice happening there. It's always a choice,
yeah,
isn't it?
we haven't been big believers in that. Just
Mm,
we're more interested in scholarships and
mm.
uh, programming than buildings. I think, or or having our names all over the place. So
Yeah. And do you think it's a duty, and this is both for those born into it and those who self-made, do you think it's a duty to give away over a certain level
yes,
for each human? Yeah.
yeah, I do. Um, and but I also think it's something that people will. It comes back to you. It's
Mm.
how is so philanthropy in the U.S. has been called kind of a necessary evil because we have a pretty porous social safety net. How do people think about philanthropy in
The
in yeah,
UK.
yeah.
Yeah, it's changing. I've witnessed a change over the last 20 or 30 years. Um, the original system was a very Victorian system of top-down giving. So a bunch of wealthy people would sit around a table and they would give away from family foundations and so on, a huge amount of money, but it was very much that they were giving to charities, and there was a sense that the charities were somehow beneath them and that they were poor and needy and had all kinds of words attached to them, which didn't put them on an equal footing with those people in status or in value and all kind of those people around the table. And I noticed that. I stepped in as chair of the Family Foundation about 10 years ago. I've just left the board, but for about 10 years I was chair of the foundation. And I really noticed an attitude problem. That was the biggest problem there was that. So, yeah, we were giving away money, but we were giving it away in a very Victorian sort of missionary kind of poor you sort of attitude. And I just thought there's something really wrong with this, that because it keeps those positions. We're here and you're here. Yeah, we're giving to you, but we're keeping you there and we're staying here, that's not a long-term positive effect. And also, it's deeply wrong because it's constantly thinking that someone needy and poor is somehow incapable of being like me, which is like, who wants to live in that world? So I talked to a lot of people and we did a lot of shifting around on the board. And I began to see that a lot of people were having that same realization in the UK, that something really, really had to change around the philanthropy model or the charity. I think the word charity was more, it was better fitted to that old, creaky, unhelpful model. And philanthropy is I think it's a better word. It's sort of a slightly more modernized. It's probably an even better word that I'm not aware of. So things like bringing people, having the board made up of people who existed in the communities which we were then working to help. For instance, very simple hack that then brought equality between the two places. So I've witnessed that change, and I think it's the other one. Do you know Rory Stewart? He was an MP. He's a very interesting guy. He runs a great podcast called The Rest Is Politics, and he was, I think, he was chair of a charity called Direct Giving. And direct giving, you literally, if you want to give £10, that £10 literally goes into the hands of a person. Pretty much, maybe £9.99, but without any strings, without any hoops to jump through. And what it says in that giving is, I trust you to be like me. If somebody gave me £10, I would spend it on my family wisely. Well, why won't somebody else do that too? So it really it forced this equality to stop thinking of people with less than me as somehow less capable, as if
Right.
poverty was their fault. It really upended that poverty blaming, because poverty blaming there was no doubt, it doesn't matter which way you slice it, the Victorians might have done a lot, but they very much felt that, it was your fault. So I've seen a change in the UK around that. I think the only place where that didn't need to be upended was in the arts. My father was a real philanthropist of the arts. There was a prize at the Royal College, City and Guilds. He was very involved. And there was much more of an equality. Somehow the giver and the receiver were felt to be on an equal footing. But take it into any sort of community, and there was a real disjoint there around attitude. So I'm glad to say that's changed. And that's something I pursue now. I've left the Family Foundation, but just working on other boards that I'm now on, I can see that change has happened, which is a good thing, because it was holding people into position. So does that ring true in the States? That attitude
It
problem?
varies. I mean, it's pretty easy to write a check always. Um,
Right.
and so part of the challenge is, are you really being hands-on and seeing where the money's going and helping? But I am a big believer in opportunities to help people, where a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of things could make a huge difference at a point in their lives. And I've done that a few times to strangers. I've read a story in the
Right.
newspaper, and that's very satisfying to,
Yeah.
like, you get in touch with the reporter and say, I read this story, can I help? And a few times that's been the case. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
uh,
because I'm a great believer as well in that, like, help the person now in front of you.
Right.
Not, as you said, actually, not this. I mean, yeah, there's room for forward planning, but the fact is, like, again, actually, the foundation that I worked on, we were very small and we gave away small amounts of money. But where we really excelled was that there was very little red tape. So we weren't. So it wasn't some far away, distant, fill in a form, jump through hoops. It was right in front of us here now, and that made it. I think actually it had much bigger impact terms of, certainly in terms of the amount of people that we could reach, and also in terms of our relationships with those people and how we changed each other. And I
Yeah.
think also, David, there are other ways, those of us privileged to have time. I mean, I don't have time on my hands, and well, let's get on to busy because I really want to get on to that. But there are other, it's not just money, is it? It's, for instance, inviting people onto boards, learning how those kind of things work. There's so many other ways, I think, that
Yeah, you can
fla- fla-
spend your time, you use your network, your social capital, if you will,
right,
to be helpful to people.
right,
Absolutely.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Can we talk a
I,
little bit about busy? Because it was so
yes,
fascinating.
sure.
Why don't you just remind everyone? So
So,
there was a comment that was made to your post. Do you want to just remind us?
yeah, so I wrote a post about busy being a status flex, a word that I just learned, and so I'm a little obsessed with this flex and that flex.
Yeah.
Um,
Did your children teach you that word, David?
no, I learned it from a few other Substack writers,
Okay.
and then my kids
Okay.
told me this weekend, Dad, it's been around for quite some
Quite
time,
some time.
like
Yeah.
10 years. I thought, wow, I'm gonna really be on the cutting edge. But
Low
there
riz, yeah.
there was a comment that now I'm trying to remember the comment. I should have it in front of me. Do you
I
recall
did.
what the
I
comment
don't have it
was?
on front of me, but it was basically about how appearing busy is a kind of status flex.
Oh,
So,
right,
so that what it reminded me of, and I think I wrote back to you and said, I witness high value women, and I'm going to gender the hell out of this, but just bear with. So, I mean, being very broad brush, tend to be. I noticed this the other day. I was walking down the street and I was looking at this advert, and it was an advert for a woman in all kinds of flashy clothes. And to me, in my head, I just thought, God, she's really busy wearing clothes. That's what she's doing. She's very busy. I'm a very busy person. I've got a very smart suit on, and I'm very busy wearing clothes as I go to my busy, important, highfalutin meeting about God knows what. And I thought, yeah, that's women, high value women in the UK, so as to, I mean, in finance terms, so as to state, no, 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 I really do matter. They have to be busy. To lie about, whereas what I witness is that very very wealthy men in the UK can go around look in the ripped, dirty old, I
right.
mean, a mess. You know, you like and that's fine. And lie about and be quite relaxed about the whole thing. And that denotes enormous wealth and time. And that's fine. But women, no, no, no. You have to be busy, busy, busy. Otherwise, somehow it's not okay to have that kind of wealth. So I think those are the kind of guardrails that the British wealthy tend to, and I don't know whether there's a difference between new and old money there, but generally that's the guardrails that British wealth set up for themselves to make sure everybody thinks the right things about them.
It's interesting. I think that in the U.S., it at least in my New York City circles, it's both men and women
Okay.
wanting to feel busy, however that's defined. So I don't think you've got the kind of charming persons wearing, a jumper with, see how I use that British word, a jumper with holes.
Right.
By the
Dirty
way, I
old
I got very
trousers.
confused with the word jumper.
Did you
I
think it
think
meant somebody jumping off a bridge? Was that?
no, I thought it was in the context it was used. I think it was used as a piece of clothing, but I didn't know
Yeah.
what piece of clothing it was. Like I didn't know whether
I
it
didn't know
was.
that was a non-American word. Yeah, because you say sweater, right? I
We say
guess.
sweater, and a
Yeah, jumper.
jumper is like a one piece. outfit that like a little boy might wear, or a
Okay, that's
dress
a
or
onesie.
something.
That's a
Like a
onesie.
onesie, right? No,
Yeah.
but right. So I was wondering why these adult people and in books like yours and Judgment of Others
Okay, we're wearing
we're putting
jumpers.
on
I'm
we're
so
putting
sorry.
on onesies and oh, that's just part of British
That's so
being
funny.
being an eccentric. But
Yeah.
so
But yeah,
what
that's
are
a good word actually. So yes, very wealthy British men can look as eccentric as they like. In fact, the more eccentric, the better. You can walk into a lunch, a garden, and realize that the most, terrible, like messy looking men are probably the Duke of Norfolk and the Earl of somewhere else, whereas the women are not afforded that luxury. It's a funny thing. I don't know where it comes from. I mean, there's got to be a gender. There's got to be some sort of patriarchal nightmare in there somewhere, but I'm not quite sure.
maybe being
But
beyond grooming, which occasionally I've been accused of, but it hasn't been purposeful.
yeah, maybe. But where do you have in the? Is there a moment? Is there an age in the wealthy man's life when he's allowed to sit back and still be considered doing his duty or his best as a very wealthy man? Does that? Is there an age?
I think there used to be much more so, but now now there is the water that we swim in here seems to be you need to be busy, and
Yeah.
and it's just maybe it's
Otherwise,
all
what you're if you're not busy, does that mean that you're not successful, or you're a wastrel, or you're ingrateful? What does it mean if somebody isn't busy?
it means you're not. It could mean to yourself or to someone else, well, you're not really important. Like an important person, like I wrote
Okay.
in my post, people who are really important actually hire people to curate their schedules.
Yeah.
And I couldn't think of anything worse, but to some people it's become a necessity because they're involved in so many different activities that they're going from, you know, meeting to meeting to appointment to traveling, and so they have their schedules become very complicated, and they find, at least they think they find, they need to have someone schedule for them. um, and so um, if you're totally available, um, it might connote that, well, people aren't. And this is stupid, but it would connote that people aren't dependent on you, and it could be the exact opposite. It could be that you're making yourself available so that if somebody needs you or someone drops by. Um,
Mm.
so I was writing this. I wrote my post kind of thinking of myself that I have imposed busyness through writing on myself, but um, I should be willing to I should be willing to interrupt my writing if, my kids come over for a visit. And
Mm.
for the most part I do. And if they catch me scrolling through notes on Substack, they'll give me a hard time. So
Hell
they
to pay. And
they
so,
keep me in line.
yeah, so internally, like that, because we have a different word in the UK, but if it's important, busy means I'm important. Where is the line inside of you that says, if I'm not busy, are you not, how much of it is it I'm not important as a person, so self-worth, and how much of it is an outside eyes, for you personally?
Oh, for me
Like,
personally,
where's the line?
I think that I think I've crossed over that, so that I'm not, if I have a day where I have no appointments, that's to me like a gift. I can do it. I can
Okay.
do whatever I want.
So your
You know,
self-worth doesn't, you don't have to have a word with yourself saying it's fine, I'm allowed to have a day off. Like I still mean something. I still have worth. That's okay.
yeah, eh,
Okay.
but I am sort of contending with, well, okay, now I'm taking up writing as a vocation. Is that, how is my self worth or self esteem now, hinging on how I do, how many subscribers I have, what the reaction is to whatever I write. Um, will I be able
Yeah.
to produce a novel that I'm proud of? All those things. Um, so yeah, so I'm questioning myself. Have I replaced one sort of
Right.
busyness with another? And how about
Yeah.
yourself? I mean, you are very disciplined writer. You've produced a lot of novels. I've been the reading beneficiary of. So thank you. But
Pleasure.
that takes a lot of time. How do you feel um,
Yeah.
about that?
About that. I mean, with the writing novels, that was definitely my effort to mean something and have validity in this world because it was all self-produced. I wasn't born into it. I wasn't given it. So that drive was the drive to feel I exist and I'm allowed to exist. I deserve to exist and I've earned it. All of that says, of course, that I really should have known that right from the get-go. All children deserve to exist, and
Hmm,
you know what I mean?
right.
But I didn't. So we'll just sort of put that kind of very corrupt premise aside. I did have a corrupt premise, and so I've been working very hard to prove my worth and my validity. And it's a conflict within me as well because obviously I keep moving the goalposts. Like if 5 years ago, if I knew where I was going to be now, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to put my feet up. But of course I'm not. I'm absolutely driving at the goalpost. I've just moved way over there. Um, but in terms of the busyness bit, I definitely am culpable in terms of like if I meet somebody out there, "Oh, how are you? Oh God, I'm so busy." I know in that, and I try not to say it actually now, but I know in that word, what I'm saying is, I matter, I matter, I matter, I matter all the time. So I try and pull back from that because all of my busyness apart from parenting, is self-inflicted pretty much. It's all through choice. I mean, I don't choose to be a writer. I'm a writer. That's it. But I choose to have the kind of output I have, the kind of goals and ambition I have. All of the other stuff I do, running the estate, sitting on various boards, all of the kind of social, like keeping, and it is really important to me. I do a lot of investment in my relationships with my friendships, and I'll do a lot of going around seeing people having dinner because they really matter to me. But it's all self-inflicted. So I try not actually to do that. Oh God, I'm so busy thing because I don't have to be this busy, and so I must like it somewhere. And if I don't like it, I should change it. But having said that, again, I do witness it, people outside of me, people I know very well and people I know less well, doing the busy flex. And this is just women, who it's screamingly obvious to me when they say, "Oh my God, I'm so busy." What they're saying is that same thing. I matter, I matter, I matter, I matter. And that I kind of go, okay, what you're really telling me is that you matter, which I mean, I can tell you you matter. You don't need to tell me you're really busy, but it's very much, yeah, it's insidious and it's a kind of it's a disease that runs through those privileged enough to kind of pick and choose, even though those privileged enough have actually set themselves up businesses which then run and have dependents and so on. I see it from reading that post and seeing it around. The two things really met in my mind, and it absolutely exists. There's also a big movement in England, an anti-busy movement of a lot of people, and a lot of people talking about just turn it down, cool it down, relax, lie on the grass, take
Right.
a moment. And I've got children going through A levels right now. And there's no doubt they came home for the weekend and it was like tools down, shoes off, lie on the grass, look at the trees, bake, do nothing. And of course we say that to our children. Um, but it doesn't seem to translate into the world of the underconfident self-worth issue that so many of us struggle with as adults, and we're talking about adults with a privileged life, so let's talk about those. That seems to be
Do you think there's
yeah.
less of that? Um, let's say in like the characters that you portrayed in your book In Judgment of Others, who I guess were middle class, upper middle class?
Middle class, upper middle class. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
And
Mm.
is there less of that I have to be busy with, or is it just the same? Because people who don't have means, they have no
They
choice,
have to be busy.
right?
That's the terrible,
Time is
shitty
money, and
irony.
yeah,
Exactly. It's almost an insult. In fact, maybe it is an insult to ape busyness in the face of wanting to feel like I've got the self-worth of somebody who can't afford not to be busy.
right.
I mean, it's a kind of terrible thing. Yeah, in judgment of others, I would say that Roz would be like that, except that she's too bone idle to do it. But
Hmm.
she would be. She's a kind of perfect example. Claire really is busy. She can't afford not to be. And Diane, who's married to Peter, she would have the opportunity to be like that, but she isn't. She isn't like that. So I don't think there was anyone in the book who really fell into that particular category. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm going to have to write someone because it's such a rich seam for me to write, and I would love to. Maybe that's a book that'll come in the future.
Right, someone
But yeah,
who is
well, write that bit. Yeah, that kind of classic, and it's again terrible cliche, but the sort of ladies who lunch, and they're terribly busy having lunch. They're terribly busy thinking up new charitable endeavours and holding garden parties and doing. They are doing lots of great stuff, but they're terribly busy doing it. And it's that aspect which just rings so many warning bells in my head around their motive. Why are they doing it? What's it giving them? Do they just feel like really they are worth nothing? And so they've got to really run to keep up with this faux sense of self-worth, because every time they stop, it drops back to how they really feel about themselves. Yeah, so I'm really familiar with that, and I can see it around. And I think it's exactly that attitude of the busy, philanthropic charity lady who lunch garden party woman who still in England, who still has the view that somehow, the poor, the needy poor, and I'm doing such good things for the needy poor, which frankly doesn't really help anyone. I mean, it's just, do you know what I mean? There's nothing equal. There's no equality there. Um, Maybe I'm being mean, but I have seen it.
Do you think most wealthy people in Britain, when they think about the poor, they think it's their fault, or do they? Because
Mm.
and I wouldn't generalize. I think I know a lot of wealthy people in the U.S. who don't feel that way, but I also there's certainly a lot of people, um, tends to be a political divide, who think, you know, I'm where I am. I didn't inherit money, but I worked really hard. Um, Maybe not a rags to riches, but I was given a good education, but I did a lot with it. And why can't, you know, these, the lazy poor lift themselves up? There's still a lot of that attitude in the
Yeah, I mean,
US.
anybody. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Although it doesn't run along clear class lines. It runs diagonal, I think, across class. But anybody in the UK who doesn't believe in the welfare system of the socialist state, I mean, then would say would victim blame in terms of poverty blame. But I would say, and that's not to say that the welfare state and the social system doesn't need an overhaul. It does need an overhaul, but there's a basic difference between those of us who believe that there should be a safety net and those of us who don't. And yeah, there are certainly plenty of people there who are not. They're not aware of their privilege. They're not aware that they were born with the tide flowing with them, and that's how they were able to go to that school and get into Cambridge. In fact, I had some young people staying with me this weekend, and one of them is a girl. She lives up in Stoke-on-Trent, in the area. It has, it's pretty poor. She's doing okay, but the area in which she lives is pretty poor. And she absolutely believes in the abolition of Oxbridge. Not the other universities, just Oxford and Cambridge, because she feels that all it does is strengthen this idea that somehow that you're better if you go there. And we had a really robust and interesting conversation about it. But there's plenty of people who are unaware that their path to Oxford or Cambridge was not just through merit.
Right.
They began very early on, and yes, they might have worked really hard, but the fact is they were in the right boat at the right time that was heading in the right direction, and they are not aware that the currents beneath that boat were aiding them. And I think that is a big piece of education that is missing from the education system, that it would do well for everybody to understand uh, how to stay aware of them. And I'm constantly trying to learn all the time how to stay aware of my privilege. I'm fully aware that I've done nothing to earn what I'm sitting in and the life I lead except, well, actually, maybe even not except writing, because even that, I have the privilege to spend time on it. So, in fact, I would say everything. I think once I write a book and it gets picked for a prize and all that kind of stuff, okay, maybe I can claim that as absolutely a meritocratic win. But other than that, really, I was born lucky. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I was
you live with it.
I was too.
Yeah.
I I guess yeah, I was just thinking about the differences. I guess if you're born into a family that goes back 1,000 years, there's something more or less permanent about that. Like that's not something that can be taken away. And you mentioned there are people who have a feeling of self importance or self worth, um, because solely because they can stretch back 1,000 years or a long time. In the U.S., we don't have that, and I think there's a lot more there. I'm sure there's insecurity all over the place in England, but at the top, I think there's even in the US, I think there's even more insecurity because there are no titles. Like you know,
So you could lose
well,
it all tomorrow. The
you
thing that gives you
right.
status, you could lose tomorrow. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
less. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's more fragile. You know
Hmm.
get involved in
Yeah,
a
I think that's
scandal and
right. And it's over. Yeah, that's a well marked difference between us. Yeah, no matter what. That's as I say. There's plenty of dukes of somewhere without a pot to piss in, but they will always be the duke of somewhere, whatever it is. So that status is,
and
until that's until that's abolished, they'll always
but
have
there'll
it.
always be if you're total if you're an impoverished aristocrat, you probably still get invited to certain things, right?
Totally,
You're you
absolutely.
still have a card, you still have a status
I can't.
card.
No
Big
question about it.
right.
More likely invited to things than multi-billionaire new money,
Right. Yeah, I mean
and
there's
treated better. Yeah,
and
that's the crazy thing.
there probably are still
And
Americans,
they'll look down on multi-billionaire
right?
as
Because
well. Yeah.
that's very new, that's very new money, and
Even if that new money worked really hard and was born with
right.
nothing and worked and earned every penny, the Duke of whatever with nothing will still look down their nose.
Are there
It's so
still
nuts.
marriages, and I'm thinking of like Gilded Age, where you've got rich Americans wanting to marry into titles? Does that still go on?
I think, yeah. I
Or
mean,
is
I very much, didn't get involved with that whole world socially, so I couldn't anecdotally say that does happen. But I would imagine it does. It's still very strategic, I think,
right.
because these estates stretch back thousands of years, and there is something magnificent about it. I mean, that was another conversation I had with the young people who came to stay, who are very, kind of left of Marx, in
Right.
terms of like how this should be, which was really interesting hearing one of my children joining in on that and having a very open conversation about like, well, So what are you going to do then when you start? You're going to give it all away? You're going to, and at the moment they're in a very, very idealistic place, which is exactly the place
Well,
that
they're
I was
they're
in.
they're around 18, right?
They're 18, yeah.
Yeah. So
And I was,
yeah,
and of course they will be free to a certain extent to either give it away or themselves walk away from it. Um, but in terms of strategic marriages, yes, I'm sure that still happens because there is a sense of the beauty of it. And I think I remember having one of the conversations like this with my father that, is it better to have one person owning a large amount of land, but looking after it really beautifully and looking after everybody really beautifully, or splitting it up so everybody owns their little bit? And it being a complete patchwork, and some bits are and some bits aren't, and there's really the left hand isn't really talking to the right hand, and there's no question that 1% of the population owning 90% of the land is completely cock a hoop. Nobody could justify that. But nevertheless, in that state, if you are good at what you do and you do have a sense of absolutely all beings equal under the sun, then it can work very well. Honestly, I haven't squared the circle because it does fly in the face of my politics,
right.
you know,
But you
because
could
I
you
had a
could
very
sit back and
socialist.
you admire something like there is a quality to persistence over time in anything. If something has lasted for a long time, that's evidence of that there's something special with regard to that. I think
Yes,
that's
I would say that, but then how do my tenants feel? They
right.
may not feel like that.
Right. That's right. Well, um, we should probably sign off.
We
And
should probably
this
wrap up.
this was a pleasure. And I have no idea what
I've
the
lost you.
technical.
The last minute.
Wait.
Hang on, David. There we go. You're
Oh,
back in.
okay.
Okay, good. No, I'd lost you.
Glitches abound, but
Stitches abound.
but this has been great.
This has been so fascinating. Thank you for inviting me to come and do this. I'm just, yeah, the chance for me to be able to talk about this stuff is so rare, and with somebody so bright and curious and generous and up for that. You really lay an example out. It's a real honor to come and
Well,
talk about it. So thank you, David. Brilliant.
well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure learning all about the differences, and
Mm,
I'm sure we'll be
yeah,
I'm sure we'll be communicating, talking very
I'm
soon.
sure we will.
Have a
I'll
wonderful
I
rest.
You will. I'm going to end it and then I'm going to send you the transcript just so we know that it's okay because it's online. Okay, bye everyone.